Welcome back. Reshaping education is a challenge being faced by many Latin American countries these days. It's a topic America's Now has been covering in depth for months, particularly in Mexico, Venezuela, and Chile. Joining us now to talk about education reform in that region is Emiliana Vegas of the Inter-American Development Bank. Her organization provides grants and financing to education systems throughout Latin America. Welcome to the show. Why are we seeing such massive protests in the countries that we just mentioned, like Mexico and Chile? Why is the education there so dysfunctional?
Well, it varies by country, and thank you for having me. In Chile, they have experienced huge growth in both students accessing all the education cycle, so from preschool to end of secondary, and students feel that they have the right to go to high quality university education, and they're not prepared. So the education system actually is not producing the skills they need to pass the very stringent exams to get into the top universities. And then in Mexico, the government of President Peña Nieto has embarked in some very ambitious and politically sensitive reforms to try and improve the quality of teaching and learning in the Mexican education system, which is also fairly low compared to international standards. And those reforms imply, a lot of changes in how teachers are evaluated, how they're paid, how they progress through the career, and that's pretty controversial.
We also want to look at the positive here. So which countries in the region should get credit for having a really good education system? And in your opinion, which country is the worst?
So paradoxically, two of the countries that you mentioned earlier that we were discussing with major protests have made important improvements. Particularly Chile is one of the top improving countries, the most rapidly improving countries in how much students learn in the international assessment called Program of International Student Assessment, PISA, which is run by the Organization of Advanced Economies, OECD. And I think in part because they have made such large improvements, there's social demand for even more. Throughout the region, we have systems that are really underperforming. And so, although not a majority of our countries participate in international assessments, of those who do, their students perform well below the average OECD country. And it's a real struggle for Latin America to match the improvements in access to education with quality.
So what do you look for when you're looking to support a school system in Latin America? What kind of criteria do you require?
One of the main criteria our organization looks at is to what extent are government officials committed to improving the education for those who are most in need. So we look at commitment to raising the quality of education for the poorest and most vulnerable populations. And we also work with political commitment to make decisions that really will impact the long term. Because education is a process that takes time to yield results. So it's not always very politically motivating for someone who's running for office to invest in those reforms that take time. In the end, it's more than building schools and opening doors to children. It's about changing what teachers do every day in schools so that students learn.
Something that's been a big topic amongst the different protests happening in Latin America has been the issue of free education. Do you think that free education is working, or do you feel like it's really the wealthy in some of these countries that are receiving a quality education?
Well, in many countries there are very important gaps in the quality of education that the wealthy and the poor receive. Nevertheless, free education in Latin America and the fact that many countries adopted free universal education has enabled the region to make immense progress toward achieving universal primary education. Today one can say that with very few exceptions in Latin America, all children who are 6 years of age will be able to attend a primary school and will complete, and about half of them will go on to secondary education. So I think the challenge is not free education, particularly in primary and secondary, because I think countries are committed to that and are delivering. In Latin America, it appears that actually free university education seems to favor the wealthy more than the poor, and that it's better for governments to actually charge tuition, but differentiate depending on whether the student and their family can pay, and provide a lot of access to scholarships and credits to other students so that all can attend.
All right, Emiliana Vegas of Washington's Inter-American Development Bank, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it.
Thank you so much.